All right, well, as we try to continue to understand the big picture of the Bible, in the last video we introduced this idea that a good way to understand the storyline of the Bible is by looking at it like a series of acts, like in a great drama or play. It usually consists of several main acts, and a good way to understand the Bible is that there are four main acts in this grand drama or narrative in the story of the Bible. In the last video, we started to look at Act 1, Scene 1, and that consisted of the creation, where God created everything. And in this video, we're going to look at Act 1, Scene 2, really sort of the second major scene in the Bible. And the main idea we see in this scene is the fall. And as we look at the rest of the chapters in Act 1, the rest of Genesis 3 through 11, we will see the story of the fall take place. Now let me explain what that means. You see, we ended off Act 1, Scene 1 with the story of how God creates everything, and at the end, He creates that everything is very good. And this goodness is exemplified, it's pictured in the beauty of the Garden of Eden and of man and woman's relationship with God there. It's this beautiful picture. But at the start of chapter 3, everything changes. You see, what happens is part of the fact that we are created in the image of God, which is something we learn in the first scene, is that we were created to have free will. Every human being has the opportunity to either follow God or reject God. We're not robots that are forced to be in relationship with God. We're given the opportunity to either follow Him or reject Him. And unfortunately, as we read the verses of Genesis chapter 3, we discover that the first human beings chose the latter. They chose to reject God. You see, God had given them just one simple command as He related to them as they were enjoying the Garden of Eden. God said, you can have whatever you want here, enjoy everything that is in this garden, but there's this one tree, and I don't want you to eat from that tree. That was it, the only rule they had to follow. And yet look what happens in Genesis chapter 3. It says that as they were hanging out in the garden one day, Eve saw that tree, the one tree that God had said not to eat from, and she looked at it, and she was tempted. And it says this in verse 6, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took and she ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. You see, they chose to reject God because they chose to disobey the one command that God had given them. And with that one choice to sin, they brought sin and brokenness into the world, and they broke their relationship with God. You see, the result of their choice to sin was that it caused them to fall out of their relationship with God. That's why it's called the fall. And not only did they lose their great relationship with God because of their choice to reject Him, it also caused them to experience pain in their life, to lose His blessing, and it resulted in great pain and ultimately in their death. And as you continue to read this chapter, not only does God tell them what their consequences are, it's pictured for us, it's described for us in what they experience, the consequences of the fall. It says that they had to then hide from God, where once they were enjoying an unbroken relationship with God, now they are hiding from Him. And ultimately, He banished them from the Garden of Eden. And so they had this once great relationship with God, enjoying that perfection of the Garden of Eden, but now because of their choice to sin, they're hiding from God and they are kicked out of that beautiful garden. And then as we continue to read the rest of the chapters in Scene 2, it is yet just more and more demonstration of the fall of humanity away from God, as we see the human race fall deeper and deeper into sin and experiencing the consequences of that. And so that now, ever since, the result is that God's relationship with humanity has been broken. And it causes us still to hide from Him in shame. And ultimately, it causes us to be cast out of His presence. And so the consequences of that fall, it touches every human being that is born, because all of us are born with a sinful human nature. It's just who we are. And the sin goes all the way back to these early chapters of the Bible. But what we'll discover is that's not the end of the story. In fact, what we're going to see is that the whole rest of the storyline of the Bible is all about God and what He's going to do to heal our broken relationship with Him and restore us back to that relationship that we see pictured in the Garden of Eden. So this is kind of a spoiler alert here, but the whole story of the Bible is God bringing us back to that original state where we enjoyed unbroken fellowship and relationship with Him in the perfection of His creation. So go ahead, why don't you pause now and discuss some of these questions with your group.